She spent all her husband's money on her lover, believing she was in control. But at the reading of the will, dread washed over her as the lawyer began to speak. Gareth Montero Bentley cruised through the rainy Chicago streets, his sharp blue eyes focused on the city's gleaming skyscrapers. At 45, he was a self-made billionaire, known for his power and innovation. His 60-story tower, Montero Plaza, rose high above him. As he stepped out of the car, his suit was spotless despite the rain. He walked into the lobby, nodding at the guards who greeted him, his mind already on the challenges awaiting him upstairs. In the elevator, his reflection stared back at him, handsome, sharp features, salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. When the doors opened to his sleek, high-rise office, Gareth took in the panoramic view of Chicago. He was at the top of his game, but something was about to shake his world. He moved to his desk, a massive slab of Italian marble, and sank into his leather chair. For a moment, Gareth allowed himself a brief respite, his eyes drifting to the framed family photo on his desk. It was a picture of him and his wife, Mary Ann, taken at their villa in the Cayman Islands last summer. Mary Ann's radiant smile beamed back at him, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders, blue eyes sparkling with what seemed like genuine joy. They looked like the perfect couple, the embodiment of success and happiness. Gareth's fingers traced the edge of the frame, a faint smile tugging at his lips as he recalled that day. It had been one of the rare occasions when he'd managed to pull himself away from work, dedicating his attention solely to his wife and their life together. Mary Ann had been so vibrant, so full of life. Moments like those reminded him why he worked so tirelessly, why he pushed himself to the edge of exhaustion day after day. But just as quickly as the warmth of that memory surfaced, it faded, replaced by a gnawing sense of unease that had been growing over the past few months. Something had shifted between them, a subtle change he couldn't quite define. Mary Ann's smile had started to feel less sincere. Her kisses lacked their usual warmth. At first, he dismissed it as paranoia, a byproduct of stress and the long hours he poured into his work. Lately, however, the feeling had grown impossible to ignore. Shaking off the unsettling thoughts, Gareth turned his attention to the stack of documents on his desk. The latest financial reports from his various enterprises lay spread out before him, demanding his attention. As Gareth began scrutinizing the numbers, his brow furrowed. Something wasn't right. The discrepancies were subtle, easily missed by less experienced eyes. But to Gareth, they stood out like glaring red flags. He reached for his phone, his fingers hovering over the speed dial for his CFO. It was late, well past midnight, but this couldn't wait. Just as he was about to make the call, his personal cell phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Mary Ann. "Don't wait up, darling. Girls' night, running late. See you in the morning. XO." Gareth stared at the message, a swirl of emotions passing through him. Relief, because he wouldn't have to explain another late night at the office, but also something darker. Suspicion. Doubt. He pushed the feeling aside, scolding himself for overthinking. Mary Ann had always been social, and her charity work often kept her out late. It was one of the things he admired about her dedication to giving back to the community. Turning his attention back to the financial discrepancies, Gareth immersed himself in his work, losing all sense of time as he dug deeper. It was nearly 3 a.m. when he finally leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. He had uncovered a pattern, a series of unexplained withdrawals and transfers carefully buried within the intricate web of his financial empire. The amounts were substantial, totaling in the millions. Yet they had been siphoned off so skillfully that they'd gone undetected until now. Gareth's mind raced with possibilities. Was it embezzlement? A sophisticated hacking scheme? Or something more personal? Over the years, he had made enemies. Success often attracted envy and resentment. But this felt different, more intimate. As he contemplated his next move, Gareth's gaze drifted once more to the photo of Mary Ann. For a fleeting moment, an unthinkable thought crossed his mind, but he dismissed it. Mary Ann was many things, but betrayal? That seemed unimaginable. Their love, their life together, was the foundation upon which he had built everything. Determined to uncover the truth, Gareth began formulating a plan. He would need to be cautious, methodical. If someone was trying to undermine him, he couldn't afford to tip them off. His investigation would have to be conducted in absolute secrecy, trusting no one until he had all the facts. Just as he prepared to shut down his computer and head home, an email notification appeared on his screen. The sender was unknown. The subject line was blank. Against his better judgment, Gareth clicked to open it. What he saw made his blood run cold. It was a photo clearly taken earlier that night. In the image, he saw Mary Ann, her blonde hair unmistakable, entering an upscale hotel. But she wasn't alone. A tall, dark-haired man had his arm around her waist, guiding her through the revolving door. Though the man's face was turned away from the camera, the intimacy of the gesture was undeniable. Gareth felt the air drain from the room. He stared at the image, willing it to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. But deep down, he knew. The pieces were starting to fall into place, forming a picture he didn't want to see. With trembling hands, he reached for his phone again, this time opening his banking app and navigating to the joint accounts he shared with Marianne. Accounts he rarely checked personally. He found what he had feared most. His worst suspicions were confirmed: massive withdrawals, extravagant purchases, transfers to unknown accounts, all bearing Marianne's digital signature. The reality of the situation struck Gareth like a physical blow. The woman he loved, the partner he had trusted completely, had been systematically draining their accounts. But for what? For whom? The man from the photo? How long had this been happening? As the first light of dawn crept over the Chicago skyline, Gareth Montero sat alone in his office, his world collapsing around him. The empire he had built, the life he had so carefully crafted, now felt hollow. He had always prided himself on his business acumen, his ability to read people and situations with precision. But how could he have been so blind to what was unraveling inside his own home? The buzzing of his phone snapped him out of his daze. A new text from Marianne. "On my way home, darling. Breakfast together?" Gareth stared at the message. His mind was racing. In that moment, he made a decision: he would not confront her. Not yet. If Marianne was capable of this level of deception, who knew what else she might be hiding? If she felt cornered, it could make things even worse. No, he needed to be smart. Strategic. He needed more information, a clearer picture of the extent of her betrayal. As he rose from his chair, Gareth caught his reflection in the window. The man staring back at him looked older, more worn than the one who had walked into the building just hours earlier. But there was something new in his eyes, a hardened resolve, a quiet, focused determination. Gareth Montero had built his empire from nothing once before. If he had to, he would do it again. But this time, he would ensure that anyone who betrayed him would face the consequences. Stepping into the elevator, a plan was already forming in his mind. Marianne, her mysterious companion. Whoever else might be involved, they had no idea what they had set in motion. As the elevator doors closed and Gareth descended to the lobby, he made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. And when he did, there would be a reckoning, one that would shake the very ground beneath him. Little did Gareth know, as he stepped back into the city he had helped shape, that his pursuit of truth and justice would take him down a darker, more dangerous path than he could have ever imagined. The game had begun, and the stakes were far higher than he realized. Across town, in a luxurious suite at the Peninsula Chicago, Marianne Montero stirred from her sleep. Reaching for her phone, she checked the message she had sent to Gareth. No response. A small frown touched her flawless features. She turned toward the man lying beside her. "Holden," she whispered, running her fingers through his dark hair. "Wake up. We need to talk." The man opened his eyes, a slow, self-assured smile spreading across his face. "What's wrong, beautiful? Having second thoughts?" Marianne shook her head, her expression sharpening. "No, but I think we need to move faster. Gareth is not stupid. We cannot risk him figuring things out before we are ready." Holden sat up, pulling Marianne close. "Do not worry, baby. Everything is going according to plan. Soon we will have it all, and Gareth Montero will be nothing more than a name in the past." As the sun rose over Chicago, casting long shadows across the skyline, the stage was set for a battle of strategy, ambition, and will. Gareth Montero, the self-made billionaire, was about to face the greatest challenge of his life. And the ones he would battle were far closer than he ever imagined. The wheels of fate were already turning, and there was no turning back. In the world of high finance and even higher stakes, only one thing was certain: when the dust settled, nothing would ever be the same. That same morning, golden sunlight filtered through the Montero penthouse, casting warm light across the polished marble floors. Marianne stirred her coffee as she stood on the balcony, lost in thought. She gazed out at Lake Michigan, its surface sparkling like a sea of diamonds. What had once inspired awe and gratitude now felt like a gilded cage, a constant reminder of the life she had grown to resent. Her phone vibrated softly on the table beside her. A text from Holden. "Miss you already. Can't wait to see you again." A faint smile touched her lips. She quickly typed a response, her heart pounding with the thrill of secrecy. Holden was everything Gareth was not: youthful, spontaneous, full of fire. Where Gareth was all business and precision, Holden brought charm and adventure. He made her feel alive again, in ways she had forgotten were even possible. As she set her phone down, Marianne caught her reflection in the glass. At 38, she was still stunning, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders, her bright blue eyes still turning heads. Yet lately, she had begun to notice subtle changes. A faint line here, a trace of tiredness there. It frightened her, the thought of fading, of losing the beauty that had always given her power and protection. The sound of footsteps behind her snapped her out of her thoughts. Gareth stepped onto the balcony, already dressed impeccably in a tailored suit despite the early hour. He kissed her cheek distractedly. "Good morning, darling," he said, his voice distant. "I am afraid I have to skip breakfast. There is a situation at the office that needs my attention." Marianne struggled to keep her voice calm. "Of course, Gareth. When is there not a situation?" If he noticed the edge in her tone, he did not show it. He was already scrolling through his phone, likely reviewing meetings and numbers. "I will make it up to you, I promise," he said. "How about dinner at Alinea this weekend? We can celebrate the Anderson deal." Marianne raised an eyebrow, feigning interest. "The Anderson deal?" Gareth's eyes lit up, the way they always did when he spoke about business. "Yes. It is a potential game changer for us. If we close it, it opens doors to new markets in Asia. I have been swamped, but it is worth it." She nodded, her mind drifting. There was a time when she had been his closest confidant, his partner in every sense. Now she felt more like a figure on display, someone to accompany him at galas and fundraisers. "That sounds wonderful, dear," she said, forcing a smile. "I am sure it will be a great success." Gareth glanced at his watch and frowned. "I have to run. I will call you later." With another quick kiss on her cheek, he was gone. The moment she heard the elevator doors close, Marianne picked up her phone and began typing. "Lunch at the usual place. I need to see you." Across town, in a sleek high-rise overlooking Millennium Park, Holden Davis was already awake. Lounging in his designer apartment, he smirked as he read Marianne's message. At 32, Holden was the picture of cultivated success, tall, confident, charismatic. He had charm that could disarm even the most skeptical hearts. And Marianne Montero had become his greatest success. They had met at a charity gala 6 months ago. Holden had been there with a purpose, scouting potential targets. Wealthy, restless women who might be vulnerable to his brand of seduction. It had not taken long for him to recognize the signs in Marianne, a woman starved for attention, trapped in a life that felt more like a performance than a passion. What had started as a carefully constructed game had taken on a life of its own. Holden found himself drawn to her wit, her spirit, the parts of her Gareth had long since taken for granted. Of course, the access she had to one of Chicago's largest fortunes only made things more compelling. As he prepared for their lunch, Holden felt a flicker of something, regret, maybe. But he pushed it aside. In his world, emotions were liabilities. Marianne was a means to an end. And if winning meant risking her heart, or Gareth's empire, so be it. Meanwhile, inside the glass and steel tower of Montero Plaza, Gareth sat surrounded by his top executives. The room was tense. Faces were grim as they reviewed the latest reports. "As you can see, Mr. Montero," said his CFO, Daniel Chan, "the discrepancies we uncovered are substantial. We are looking at losses in the tens of millions, just over the past 6 months." Gareth leaned back, his thoughts racing. He had suspected something was wrong, but the magnitude was greater than he ever expected. "Are we certain this is not just a clerical error?" Daniel shook his head. "We have gone over everything multiple times. This is not a mistake. It appears to be a deliberate and very well-hidden scheme to drain funds from the company." A heavy silence fell over the room as Daniel's words settled in. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was she truly ready to abandon everything she had built, everything she had endured, for a man she had known for less than a year? Holden was charming, yes. He was exciting, undeniably. But he was also unpredictable, driven by ambition and a hunger for control that at times mirrored Gareth's in unsettling ways. Marianne stared at her reflection in the vanity mirror, at the flawless makeup she was now wiping away with steady, deliberate strokes. Her face, still striking, still commanding attention, seemed suddenly unfamiliar. The woman in the mirror was no longer just the elegant wife of a powerful man. She was a conspirator, a woman standing on the edge of a choice that could not be undone. She glanced down at her hand, the massive diamond engagement ring catching the soft light of the vanity bulbs. That ring had once symbolized security, devotion, and a life others envied. Now, it felt like a shackle. She ran her thumb across the cool, flawless surface of the stone, her heart aching with a mix of fear and anticipation. She had dreamed of escape before. Idle fantasies whispered to herself late at night while Gareth worked through another business dinner. But this was different. This was real. The decision had been made, and her next move would determine the course of the rest of her life. Across the city, in his luxurious high-rise apartment, Holden Davis stood shirtless at the window, the lights of Chicago painting gold and blue across his skin. A half-empty tumbler of scotch hung loosely in his hand, the liquid inside catching the skyline's reflection. His eyes narrowed slightly as he sipped, replaying the conversation with Marianne in his mind. She was on the hook. He could feel it. The hesitation in her voice had faded, replaced by that breathless curiosity, that flicker of reckless energy he had come to rely on when seducing a target. But Marianne was more than a conquest. She was the golden goose, the key to everything he had worked toward. He had played this game before, targeting wealthy women bored with their lives, hungry for excitement, eager to be seen. But Marianne was different. Not because she was harder to charm, on the contrary, her loneliness made her more vulnerable, but because Gareth Montero was not just any husband. Gareth was dangerous, powerful, intelligent, the kind of man who didn't get blindsided easily. That thought alone was enough to tighten Holden's grip on his glass. Still, he reminded himself, Gareth didn't know. Not yet. And by the time he did, it would be too late. With Marianne's help, Holden could siphon enough money, enough assets, to disappear and start fresh, somewhere far away. Somewhere warm. Somewhere Gareth couldn't reach. Back in Montero Plaza, Gareth stood in his darkened office, the city stretching endlessly beyond the wall of glass before him. His reflection hovered faintly in the window, a ghostly echo of the man he had been just 24 hours earlier. That man had been focused on growth, on expansion, on finalizing the Anderson deal and opening new doors in Asia. That man had been in control. Now, Gareth felt like a man standing in the middle of a storm, his empire under siege, his trust betrayed, and the woman he had built a life with plotting behind his back. But he wasn't afraid. No, what Gareth felt now was something far colder. A quiet, burning resolve. The photos Sabrina had delivered were burned into his memory, Marianne and Holden, seated too close, their bodies angled toward each other in that unmistakable way lovers moved. The way Marianne smiled, the way Holden touched her hand as if it belonged to him. Gareth had studied every detail, every movement, every betrayal. And then there were the financial records, bank transfers, new accounts opened under aliases, property searches in the Caribbean. He knew the game they were playing, and he had played it better than anyone. Gareth hadn't clawed his way from poverty to billionaire status by being soft. He had made hard decisions, ruthless ones. And if Marianne thought she could outmaneuver him now, she had forgotten who he truly was. Sabrina, he said, his voice calm but steely as she stepped into the office once again. I want you to coordinate with Dren. I don't want a paper trail. No digital communications. Everything in person. Full surveillance on Holden Davis. I want to know where he goes, who he talks to, how he gets his money. And I want his history. Every scam, every deal, every woman. Don't miss anything. Yes, Mr. Montero, she replied quietly, knowing better than to question his tone. What about Mrs. Montero? Gareth's eyes narrowed slightly. He turned back to the window, the glint of light on the skyline flickering like fire in his gaze. Not yet, he said. Let her believe I'm blind. Let her play the role a little longer. I want them to get comfortable, overconfident. A long silence followed. Then Gareth spoke again, softer this time but with unmistakable intensity. When this is over, Sabrina, I'm not just ending their game. I'm making sure they remember who they crossed. For the rest of their lives. Sabrina nodded once and left, the door closing behind her with a soft click. Outside, night had fully descended upon Chicago. The streets pulsed with energy, cars, trains, laughter, secrets. But above it all, behind polished glass and steel, a war had begun. And none of the players knew just how far it would go. The pieces were in motion. The betrayal was real. And Gareth Montero was about to remind everyone exactly what happened when you tried to steal from a man who had built his world from the ashes. She had known him for only 6 months, but then she remembered the thrill of Holden's touch, the promise of a life brimming with passion and adventure. She thought of the years spent playing the perfect wife, always in Gareth's shadow, never truly living for herself. No, there was no turning back now. She had made her choice, and she would see it through to the end. Across town, in his sleek, modern apartment, Holden pored over financial documents, his mind racing with possibilities. Marianne's inside information had opened avenues he had never even imagined. With her help, he could siphon off millions, maybe even billions, without Gareth ever suspecting a thing. It was the score of a lifetime, and Holden was determined to make the most of it. But as he worked, a nagging doubt gnawed at the back of his mind. He had always prided himself on staying detached, viewing his marks as nothing more than stepping stones to the life he wanted. Yet Marianne was different. Despite his best efforts, he found himself genuinely caring for her, wanting to give her the life she deserved, a life without secrets or fear. It was a dangerous sentiment in his line of work, one that could lead to costly mistakes. Holden shook his head, forcing the thoughts away. He had to stay focused. There would be time for sentiment later, once they were safely away with their newfound wealth. For now, he needed to remain sharp, anticipating every possible move Gareth might make. And in his office at Montero Plaza, Gareth sat alone in the darkness, his face illuminated only by the glow of his computer screen. The initial shock and pain of Marianne's betrayal had hardened into something colder, focused, unrelenting rage. He had always known the business world was ruthless, that loyalty was rare. But he had never imagined that the most dangerous threat to his empire would come from within his own home. As he reviewed the evidence Sabrina had gathered, a plan began to form in Gareth's mind. It was risky, potentially devastating if it failed, but if it succeeded, it would not only protect his fortune, it would ensure that Marianne and Holden understood exactly what it meant to betray Gareth Montero. He reached for his phone, dialing a number he had hoped never to use again. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. "Rin here. Jake. It's Gareth Montero." "I need your services," Gareth said, his voice calm but ice cold. "It's a delicate matter, one requiring absolute discretion." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Rin replied, his tone all business. "I'm listening, Mr. Montero." As Gareth laid out the framework of his plan, a grim satisfaction settled over him. Marianne and Holden believed they were in control, that they were manipulating the situation. But they were wrong. They had no idea how far Gareth was willing to go. In his world, there were no second chances, no room for mercy. They had made their choice. Now, they would face the consequences. The stage was set. The players were in position. In the weeks to come, a war would unfold beneath the glittering skyline of Chicago, a war of strategy, will, and relentless precision. And when the dust settled, only one side would be left standing. As Gareth ended the call, he allowed himself a cold, measured smile. Let Marianne and Holden bask in their illusion of victory. Soon enough, they would learn the true cost of crossing Gareth Montero. The clock on his desk ticked steadily, counting down the moments until the real game began. In the world of high finance and even higher stakes, time was the most valuable currency of all. And Gareth intended to make every second count. Early morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Gareth's office, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany desk. He sat motionless, his piercing blue eyes locked on the screen in front of him. The soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of the waking city below were the only interruptions to the oppressive silence. For hours, he had combed through financial records, bank statements, transaction logs, offshore accounts. What he uncovered made his blood run cold. The discrepancies weren't just suspicious, they were damning. Millions of dollars had been siphoned off through a sophisticated network of shell companies and false accounts. At first, Gareth suspected corporate espionage, perhaps a mole within his organization. But as he dug deeper, a far more personal and devastating truth emerged. His fingers flew over the keyboard, chasing the trail of missing funds. Each new discovery felt like a fresh wound. Luxury purchases in Paris, private jet rentals to exotic destinations, massive cash withdrawals from accounts he hadn't even known existed. And at the center of it all, one name, appearing over and over again. Marianne Montero. "It can't be," Gareth muttered, his voice hoarse from hours of silence. But the truth stared back at him. The woman he had loved and trusted for over 2 decades was systematically bleeding their empire dry. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Sabrina, ever loyal, entered with a look of deep concern. "Mr. Montero," she said gently, "you've been here all night. Is everything all right?" Gareth looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, his face drawn and haunted. "Sabrina, I need you to do something for me. It's sensitive." She nodded, her professionalism masking her growing concern. "Of course, sir. Anything. I need you to hire a private investigator, the best in Chicago. I want every move Marianne makes documented. Every person she meets. Every place she goes. He paused, lowering his voice to a whisper. And Sabrina, this stays between us. No one can know. Without a word, she nodded and slipped out the door, her expression tight with unease. Gareth turned back to his screen, his mind a swirl of questions. How long had this been happening? And more importantly, why? They had built everything together. Every deal, every success, they had done it side by side. What could have driven her to betray him so completely? In the weeks that followed, Gareth lived a double life. To the outside world, he remained the confident, composed tycoon, shaking hands, finalizing deals, expanding his empire. But behind closed doors, he was a man unraveling, consumed by suspicion and heartache. Then came the final blow. On a crisp autumn evening, Gareth sat in an unmarked car across the street from the Four Seasons Hotel. His heart pounded as he watched the entrance, waiting. At exactly 8:15 p.m., a sleek black Audi pulled up. Marian stepped out, stunning in a red cocktail dress. But she wasn't alone. A man Gareth didn't recognize exited the driver's side, a tall, dark-haired figure, considerably younger. He placed his hand on the small of Marianne's back as they entered the hotel together. The easy intimacy of the gesture told Gareth everything he needed to know. For a long moment, he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The betrayal hit him like a freight train. With trembling hands, he reached for his phone and dialed. "Jake," he said, barely above a whisper. "It's Gareth Montero. I need everything you can find on the man with my wife, name, background, finances, everything." When he hung up, a wave of nausea surged through him. Gareth barely made it out of the car before collapsing to his knees, retching violently onto the sidewalk. Passers-by gave him a wide berth, none recognizing the billionaire behind the mask of devastation. When he finally stood, wiping his mouth with a handkerchief, Gareth felt something he hadn't experienced in years: utter, crushing defeat. The woman he had built a life with had not only betrayed him emotionally, she was actively dismantling the empire they had built together. The next few days blurred into a haze of fury and disbelief. Gareth threw himself into his work with a relentless obsession. He arrived before dawn, left long after dark, working through the night as if success could somehow erase the pain. But deep down, he knew this was no longer about money. It was about pride, about power, and about vengeance. As Chicago awakened beneath a pale winter sky, the city remained unaware of the silent war brewing behind its polished skyscrapers and manicured facades. The media buzzed with speculation about Gareth Montero's condition. Rumors swirled. Some said it was exhaustion. Others whispered of a terminal illness. Only a select few knew the truth, and even they didn't know the full extent of what was coming. Holden Davis lounged in a penthouse suite overlooking Lake Michigan, savoring what he believed was a well-earned victory. Marianne was by his side, her laughter light and carefree as they toasted to their future. To them, Gareth Montero was already out of the picture, an aging magnate who had lost control of his empire and his wife. What they didn't realize was that Gareth's apparent downfall was not an end, but a trap, a final gambit carefully designed to expose and destroy them. While Gareth's body lay motionless in a hospital bed, the legal and financial mechanisms he had set in motion roared to life. Entire subsidiaries were dissolved overnight, shell companies restructured, and hidden assets activated. Trusted allies, people Gareth had mentored, supported, and sometimes blackmailed, stepped forward, not out of loyalty, but out of carefully negotiated necessity. Sabrina worked tirelessly behind the scenes, coordinating the quiet chaos with the precision of a seasoned general. She had been Gareth's assistant for years, privy to more secrets than she cared to admit. But now, as executrix of his contingency protocols, she wielded more power than she had ever imagined. Her orders were simple: follow the plan, no matter what. Meanwhile, Holden began to notice small things going wrong. A frozen account here, a denied transaction there. He chalked it up to standard banking delays, until his personal credit card stopped working and a luxury apartment lease was abruptly terminated. Still, he brushed it off, unwilling to believe the empire he was building could unravel so quickly. Marianne, for her part, sensed the change more keenly. A sudden chill in business conversations, friends who stopped returning calls, an attorney who quit without warning. It was as if the very ground beneath her feet had shifted, and she couldn't find her balance. But pride and guilt kept her from investigating too deeply. In her heart, she feared the truth but wasn't ready to face it. And so the days passed. Gareth's physical condition remained unchanged, stable but unresponsive. His doctors spoke in hushed tones about the slim chances of recovery. But Sabrina knew better. She had read the instructions Gareth had written in the event of such an outcome. Do not wait for me. The plan must continue. No matter what happens to my body, the Empire survives. Soon, subpoenas began arriving at Holden's doorstep. Investigators launched quiet probes into shell corporations connected to his name. Unpaid taxes surfaced, audits were initiated, and former victims began coming forward, emboldened by whispers that someone powerful was finally pulling the strings in their favor. Holden, cornered and confused, tried to reach Marianne, only to find her phone disconnected. In a moment of desperation, he returned to the Four Seasons, hoping to find her or at least some trace of stability. But the room they had shared had been emptied, the staff instructed to turn him away. Across town, Marianne sat alone in a modest apartment, her hands trembling as she read a letter delivered by courier. It was from Gareth. Typed and signed weeks before his collapse, it was short but devastating. You made your choice, Marianne. Now live with it. What we build is gone, but I promise you, so is everything you thought you'd gain from its destruction. GM. She read it again and again, tears blurring the words as the weight of her decisions finally settled in. The love she had once shared with Gareth, the trust she had taken for granted, the security she had traded away, all gone. And what remained? A man who was slipping through her fingers, and a life unraveling faster than she could hold it together. In the hospital, Gareth's heart monitor beeped steadily, rhythm unchanged. His eyes remained closed, his muscles still. But deep within the mind of the man who had once dominated boardrooms and headlines, a flicker remained, of memory, of strategy, of purpose. The game wasn't over. It was just entering its endgame. Chicago continued its business, unaware of the drama unfolding in its midst. The first domino of Gareth's intricate plan had begun to fall. The endgame was in motion, and nothing would ever be the same again. The steady beeping of medical equipment echoed softly in the private hospital room where Gareth Montero lay motionless. His once powerful frame was now frail and diminished. The stark white walls and antiseptic air gave the room an air of clinical detachment, a stark contrast to the storm raging within the comatose man's mind. Dr. M. Chun, Gareth's lead physician, stood at the foot of his bed, studying the latest test results with a furrowed brow. She turned to Sabrina, who had remained by Gareth's side almost constantly since his hospitalization. His vitals are stable, Dr. Chun said gently, but there's been no significant improvement in brain activity. At this point, we have to consider the possibility that he may not regain consciousness. Sabrina nodded solemnly, her eyes never leaving Gareth's face. He's a fighter, Dr. Chun. If anyone can beat this, it's him. After the doctor left, Sabrina leaned close to Gareth's ear. I don't know if you can hear me, Mr. Montero, but I'm carrying out your instructions. Everything is proceeding exactly as you planned. Deep within his coma, Gareth's mind churned. The betrayal by Marianne. The devastating diagnosis. The elaborate revenge he had set in motion. It all swirled in a maelstrom of memories and strategy. In his mind's eye, Gareth stood at the pinnacle of his empire, surveying all he had built. But the vision twisted, crumbling away to reveal his current state, trapped in a failing body, racing against time to ensure his plan reached completion. Across town, in the opulent Montero penthouse, Marianne paced anxiously, her phone pressed to her ear. Holden, we need to move faster, she said in a hushed but urgent tone. Gareth's condition has opened doors we didn't expect. We have to act before anyone starts asking questions. Holden's smooth voice crackled through the line, calm but deliberate. Patience, sweetheart. We can't afford mistakes. One wrong move, and we risk losing everything. Marianne's frustration flared. We're talking about billions, Holden. With Gareth out of the picture, we could have it all. Don't you see? This is our chance. After ending the call, Marianne caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her no longer resembled the composed, supportive wife she had portrayed for years. Her eyes were sharper now, calculated, determined. The thrill of her clandestine meetings with Holden had once intoxicated her. But now, with Gareth incapacitated and the prize within reach, a new emotion had taken hold, impatience. Meanwhile, in his sleek downtown apartment, Holden Davis sat at his computer, a glass of scotch by his elbow. The glow from the screen lit up his perfectly groomed face as he studied financial documents and bank statements. To outsiders, Holden looked like the very image of success, young, wealthy, charismatic. But behind the polished mask was a man driven by a relentless hunger. More money, more power, more wins. Marianne Montero had been his greatest challenge and potentially his greatest prize. Not only was she alluring and well-connected, But she also held the keys to a fortune that could elevate him beyond anything he'd previously imagined. Holden had played his role flawlessly: confidant, lover, co-conspirator. But as he reviewed their network of accounts, a nagging sense of unease took root. Something didn't add up. The Montero wealth was vast, but certain critical assets seemed unaccounted for. Had Gareth suspected their scheme? Had he hidden reserves beyond Marianne's reach? Or was there an entirely different game at play, one Holden hadn't yet perceived? He reached for his phone, then stopped. Marianne had become increasingly erratic, her desire for quick results risking the integrity of their careful planning. No, he would keep his doubts to himself. In Holden's world, information was power, and he wasn't about to give his away. Back at the hospital, Sabrina sat beside Gareth's bed, speaking quietly with Jake Wren, the private investigator Gareth had hired before his collapse. Mr. Montero's instructions were clear, Sabrina said, barely above a whisper. We're to continue as if he's still running the company. All major decisions go through the protocols he's set in place. Wren nodded, his weathered face etched with concern. And the other matter? The surveillance on Mrs. Montero and her associate. Sabrina's expression hardened. Continue. Mr. Montero was very specific. Every detail must be documented. As they spoke, neither of them noticed the slight flutter of Gareth's eyelids, nor the faint twitch of his fingers. Deep within, Gareth fought to emerge from the darkness threatening to consume him. He had come too far to give in now. In his mind, the chessboard remained, every piece still in place, every move still possible. Marianne and Holden believed they were calling the shots, but they were only playing parts in a game they didn't understand. Days blurred into weeks, and the Montero empire continued to operate as if its founder were still at the helm. Stock prices held steady. Projects moved forward. Investors remained confident. Outwardly, all seemed well. Emboldened by Gareth's absence, Marianne began taking a more visible role in the company. She appeared at board meetings, gave interviews, and painted herself as the loyal wife stepping up during a crisis. But behind closed doors, her actions revealed something else: midnight meetings with attorneys, secret discussions with Holden, financial reports flagged and filed away. What Marianne didn't know was that she was being watched. Gareth had placed loyal operatives throughout the company, trusted employees now reporting every move she made to Sabrina. Every suspicious document, every unauthorized request, every back-channel meeting, it was all recorded. Meanwhile, Holden wrestled with a growing sense of doubt. The deeper he dug into the finances, the more convinced he became that something was wrong. Money had vanished. Investment paths led to nowhere. Key documents were encrypted or missing entirely. One night, unable to shake the feeling they had been outplayed, he arrived at the penthouse without warning, clutching a folder of financial discrepancies. "We need to talk," he said sharply as Marianne opened the door. "Something's wrong with the numbers." "I think Gareth might have seen this coming." Marianne's eyes narrowed. "That's ridiculous. He's in a coma. He can't possibly." Holden interrupted, spreading the documents across the kitchen island. "Look at this. Certain accounts don't align. Some assets, huge assets, are just gone. I think he buried them somewhere we can't reach." As she examined the records, doubt slowly crept into Marianne's expression. Had she underestimated her husband? Was it possible that Gareth Montero, even from a hospital bed, was still 10 steps ahead? Neither of them noticed the small, sleek listening device tucked neatly into a vase of flowers in the corner, quietly transmitting everything. A silent witness to their growing panic and recriminations, miles away in a nondescript office building, Jake Green listened to the conversation with grim satisfaction. He picked up his secure phone and dialed Sabrina's number. "It's happening," he said simply. "They're starting to unravel." Sabrina's voice was steady when she replied, "Good. Proceed to the next phase." Mr. Montero was very clear about what needs to happen now. Hanging up, Sabrina looked at the silent figure lying in the hospital bed. "It's working, sir," she whispered. "Everything is falling into place, just as you planned." Deep within his coma, Gareth Montero felt a surge of triumph. The pieces were moving. The trap was closing. Soon, very soon, Marianne and Holden would learn the true cost of their betrayal. But even as his plan advanced, Gareth found himself locked in another battle, a fight for his very survival. The cancer that had ravaged his body before the stroke continued its relentless advance. Dr. Chun and her team worked tirelessly, employing experimental treatments and aggressive therapies, but the prognosis remained grim. In his mind, Gareth raced against time, reviewing every detail of his plan, searching for any weakness or oversight that could derail his revenge. He had sacrificed everything for this, his health, his happiness, perhaps even his life. Failure was not an option. As weeks turned into months, tension in Chicago's business community reached a fever pitch. Rumors swirled about the true state of Gareth Montero's health, power struggles within the company, and the possibility of a hostile takeover. Marianne found herself besieged from all sides. Board members questioned her authority, longtime allies grew distant, and reporters dogged her every step, hungry for even a hint of scandal. The pressure took its toll, and cracks began to appear in her carefully cultivated image. One particularly stressful day, after a contentious board meeting, Marianne retreated to her office, her hands trembling as she poured herself a generous glass of wine. She was about to take a sip when her gaze fell upon a framed photo on her desk, a picture of her and Gareth on their wedding day. They were young and smiling, filled with hope for the future. For a moment, Marianne felt a pang of something, regret, guilt, but she quickly pushed it aside. She had come too far to second-guess herself now. Gareth had taken her for granted, prioritizing his ambition and empire over their marriage. She deserved this. She deserved the life she was fighting for. But as she stared at the photo, a chilling thought crept into her mind. What if Gareth woke up? What if, against all odds, he recovered and returned to reclaim his empire? The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor, as the full implications of that possibility hit her. Across town, Holden was facing his own crisis of confidence. His usual smooth charm had deserted him, replaced by a gnawing paranoia. Every sideways glance, every whispered conversation he wasn't privy to, felt like a potential threat. He had always prided himself on his ability to read people, to stay one step ahead of the game. But now, he felt like a man stumbling in the dark, uncertain of his next move. The Montero fortune, which had once seemed so close to his grasp, now felt like a mirage, always retreating just as he reached for it. In a moment of weakness, Holden considered cutting his losses and fleeing. He had stashed away enough money to start over somewhere far from Chicago in the tangled web of lies he had spun. But the thought of giving up, of letting Marianne and all that wealth slip through his fingers, was unbearable. No, he had come too far to back out now. He would see this through to the end, no matter the cost. As Marianne and Holden wrestled with their growing fears and doubts, Gareth Montero's plan continued to unfold with meticulous precision. Key assets were quietly shifted. Loyal employees were positioned in strategic roles. Incriminating evidence was collected and stored, waiting for the perfect moment to be unleashed. Sabrina, working tirelessly behind the scenes, orchestrated it all with a level of skill that would have made Gareth proud. She was his most trusted lieutenant, the only one who understood the full extent of his scheme, and she was determined to see it through, to honor the faith he had placed in her. But even Sabrina couldn't have anticipated the next twist in the tale. On a cold, rainy night in February, as she sat by Gareth's bedside reading him the latest company reports, something extraordinary happened. Gareth's eyes, which had remained closed for so long, suddenly fluttered open. His lips moved, forming words that were barely audible. Sabrina leaned in, her heart pounding. "Sabrina," Gareth whispered, his voice rough from disuse. "Is it done?" Tears sprang to Sabrina's eyes as she grasped his hand. "Not yet, Mr. Montero. But soon. Everything is proceeding exactly as you planned." A faint smile touched Gareth's lips before his eyes drifted shut once more. But this time, it was different. The machines monitoring his brain activity sprang to life, displaying patterns that had been absent for months. Dr. Chun, summoned to the room, could hardly believe her eyes. "It's remarkable," she said, reviewing the data. "Mr. Montero appears to be emerging from his coma. I can't explain it, but he's fighting his way back." News of Gareth's improvement sent shockwaves through the Montero empire. Board members who had been wavering in their support suddenly rallied. Employees who had been quietly seeking other opportunities recommitted themselves to the company. And in penthouse suites and exclusive clubs across Chicago, the city's elite began to recalculate their allegiances. For Marianne and Holden, the news was nothing short of catastrophic. All their careful planning, all their schemes and manipulations, now seemed on the verge of unraveling. They met in a secluded hotel room, both pale and agitated. "We need to move now," Marianne insisted, pacing the room like a caged animal. "If Gareth wakes up, if he talks to the board, or the lawyers, or—" Finished, Holden interrupted, sprawled in an armchair, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "It's too risky. We don't have access to all the accounts yet. If we act now, we could end up with nothing." Their argument raged for hours, their desperation mounting, their once united front crumbling under the weight of mutual suspicion and barely concealed hostility. By the time they parted ways in the early hours of the morning, their alliance was fractured, each of them distrustful of the other. What neither of them realized was that their entire conversation had been recorded, every word, every gesture captured by the sophisticated surveillance equipment Jake Green had installed. The device had been placed in the room weeks earlier. As dawn broke over Chicago, casting long shadows across the city's iconic skyline, the stage was set for the final act of Gareth Montero's grand design. In his hospital room, attended by Dr. Chun and a team of specialists, Gareth continued his slow but determined journey back to consciousness. Sabrina, exhausted but exhilarated, made a series of phone calls, setting the last pieces of Gareth's intricate puzzle into motion. Board members were summoned for an emergency meeting. Lawyers were placed on standby. And deep within a secure vault beneath the Montero building, a set of documents that had lain dormant for months was finally retrieved. To the outside world, it seemed like a miracle. The triumphant return of a beloved business leader defying the odds to reclaim his rightful place at the head of his empire. Headlines proclaimed the Montero miracle, and news crews camped outside the hospital, desperate for updates on Gareth's condition. But beneath the surface, a different story was unfolding. The trap Gareth had meticulously constructed was about to be sprung, and the unsuspecting prey, Marianne and Holden, had no idea how thoroughly they had been outmaneuvered. As the city held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next, Gareth Montero was ready. The shock on Marianne's face was unmistakable, despite her efforts to maintain composure. A slight intake of breath, a tightening of her jaw. Those who watched closely could see the storm building behind her carefully curated exterior. She had gambled everything, assuming Gareth would either never wake or, if he did, be too weak to strike back. But now, even in death, he had outmaneuvered her. The room remained silent as Goldstein continued. To Mr. Holden Davis, I leave nothing. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Holden, seated near the back, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his face flushing red. It wasn't just the exclusion that stung. It was the public nature of the rebuke. Gareth had made it clear. He had seen through Holden's charm, his manipulation, and deemed him unworthy of any part of the empire. Goldstein paused for a moment, allowing the weight of those words to settle before proceeding. We will now take a short recess before the second portion of today's proceedings. Upon our return, we will view Mr. Montero's recorded message. People stood and murmured in hushed tones, some glancing nervously toward Marianne and Holden, others already recalculating their positions in the new Montero landscape. Sabrina, standing near the door, observed it all with quiet satisfaction. Everything was going according to plan. In the hallway, Marianne confronted her attorney, her voice low and tense. Is there anything we can do? This can't be legal. Her attorney sighed, clearly having anticipated the question. It's legal. Ironclad. Gareth spent the better part of the past year bulletproofing this will. There's no easy way to challenge it without exposing ourselves to scrutiny. Then we find the hard way, she snapped. Meanwhile, Holden leaned against a marble column, dazed. The foundation beneath his feet felt like it had cracked wide open. He had built his life on manipulation and charm, always confident he'd land on his feet. But Gareth had pulled the rug out from under him with surgical precision. Back inside the boardroom, the second half of the meeting began. Goldstein stood beside a large screen as the lights dimmed. He pressed play. The screen flickered to life, and Gareth Montero appeared pale, thin, but unmistakably lucid. His voice, though raspy, carried an authority that silenced the room. If you're watching this, Gareth began, then I am no longer alive. But make no mistake, I am not gone. My influence, my legacy, my vision, they endure. He looked directly into the camera, and it felt to everyone in the room like he was staring straight into their souls. I built the Montero Corporation from nothing, and I built it to last. This empire was never meant to be a playground for the disloyal or the greedy. I watched you, all of you, in my final months. I saw the maneuvering, the betrayals, the schemes. You underestimated me. That was your first mistake. The camera panned slightly to reveal Gareth's hand resting on a thick file folder. This contains documentation. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal. I may be gone, but this, he tapped the folder, this ensures that justice does not die with me. Marianne paled. Holden looked physically ill. To those of you who stood by me, who remained loyal, you will find your rewards generous. To those who plotted behind my back, who sought to dismantle what I spent a lifetime building, you will find yourselves exposed. He leaned closer to the camera, voice lowering to a near whisper. Consider this your reckoning. The screen faded to black. Silence reigned. Then Goldstein cleared his throat. Per Mr. Montero's instructions, a full audit of the corporation's financial and communication records has already begun. Relevant materials will be turned over to legal authorities where necessary. It was the final blow. Marian stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the polished wood floor. Without a word, she turned and left the room, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble hallway. Holden followed, but at a distance, knowing full well that whatever alliance they had once shared had shattered completely. In the days that followed, Chicago buzzed with the fallout. Headlines spoke of Montero's final move, of board shakeups, investigations, and a new era for the corporation. Sabrina, now installed as interim CEO, navigated the storm with poise and resolve, her every decision guided by the legacy Gareth had left behind. And somewhere, in the quiet of a cemetery beneath a polished headstone, Gareth Montero rested, not in peace, but in triumph. Marianne's mind reeled. This couldn't be happening. There had to be some mistake. She opened her mouth to protest, but Goldstein was already moving on. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, we will now take a brief recess. Please return in 15 minutes for the viewing of Mr. Montero's video message. As the room emptied, Marianne remained frozen in her seat, stunned. Her attorney leaned in, whispering urgently about possible legal challenges and appeals, but his words washed over her unheard. She was too lost in her shock to notice Holden enter the room until he was standing directly in front of her. Marianne, he said, his voice low and urgent, we need to talk. Now. She looked up at him and saw the panic in his eyes. Without a word, she rose and followed him into a small private office adjacent to the conference room. As soon as the door closed, Holden spun around, no longer able to hide his frustration. What the hell happened in there? Where's the money? Where's control of the company? Marianne shook her head, still dazed. I don't know. I don't understand. This isn't what we planned. This isn't what Gareth and I agreed to years ago, she said, her voice trembling. Holden ran his hands through his hair, his calm persona unraveling. You told me you had everything under control. You said Gareth would never suspect. I burned through everything I had getting ready for our exit plan. If we don't get that money. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication hung heavily between them. Marian stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time. The charm, the promises of adventure, the passion, it was all stripped away. What remained was the truth. Holden Davis was a con artist. And she had fallen for his greatest con. Before she could speak, a knock at the door startled them both. Sabrina's voice came through, calm and professional. Mrs. Montero. Mr. Davis. The video presentation is about to begin. They returned to the conference room, each choosing seats as far from the other as possible. The lights dimmed, and a large screen descended from the ceiling. Static flickered briefly, then Gareth Montero's face appeared. He looked pale, the effects of his illness evident, but his eyes burned with an intensity that silenced the room. If you're watching this, Gareth began, his voice firm despite his frail appearance, then I am gone. But don't mourn me. What you are about to witness is the culmination of my life's work, my final and greatest achievement. He paused, a slight smile playing at his lips. I'm sure by now you've heard the will. I apologize for the deception, but it was necessary. You see, the real distribution of my assets, the true future of the Montero Empire, is only now being revealed. Marian felt her heart skip a beat. A flicker of hope lit inside her. Was this all an elaborate game? Was her inheritance, her rightful place at the helm of the company, about to be announced? But as Gareth continued, that hope quickly died. For the past year, he said, I have been aware of a plot against me, a conspiracy to take my fortune and dismantle what I've built. The architects of this plan believed themselves clever, convinced they had deceived me. But like so many before them, they underestimated me. His gaze seemed to pierce the camera, making each person feel as though he spoke directly to them. Marianne, my dear wife, he said, his tone cold and unforgiving, did you truly think I wouldn't notice the missing funds? The hidden accounts? Did you believe your affair with Mr. Davis would go undetected? Marian felt the blood drain from her face. Around the room, gasps and murmurs rippled. She wanted to run, to disappear, but she was frozen in place, unable to tear her eyes away from Gareth's accusing stare. And you, Holden Davis, Gareth continued, his voice laced with disdain. You're not the first to try to infiltrate my world, and likely not the last. But you were certainly the most reckless. Holden turned pale, gripping the arms of his chair as if they might keep him anchored. What you are about to see, Gareth said, is the result of months of preparation and investigation. Mr. Goldstein, if you would kindly distribute the files. Goldstein rose, a stack of thick manila envelopes in his arms. He moved around the room, placing one in front of each person. In these files, Gareth explained, you'll find irrefutable proof of the conspiracy against me, bank records, surveillance images, recorded conversations. Everything necessary to expose the truth. The room erupted into chaos as the envelopes were torn open, each revealing damning evidence. Gareth's voice cut through the noise. This isn't just about punishment, it's about justice. It's about safeguarding what I've built. He outlined a restructuring plan that would divide control among loyal employees and advisors. The Montero Foundation, his philanthropic legacy, would become the majority shareholder. Its mission would expand to ensure the company operated with integrity. And as for the personal fortune that Marianne and her accomplice so desperately sought, Gareth said, a grim satisfaction in his tone, it will be used to create a fund for victims of financial crimes. A fitting purpose, wouldn't you say? As Gareth's revenge unfolded, Marianne's world collapsed. Everything she had plotted, every lie, every betrayal, it was all undone. Worse than undone, it had been exposed. She was ruined. Her reputation destroyed. Her future vanished. She turned to Holden, desperate for some kind of reassurance. But his chair was empty. Amid the chaos, he had quietly slipped away, abandoning her to face the consequences alone. Gareth's voice returned, softer now. Marianne, he said gently, I loved you once. I believe we shared a dream, a vision. I gave you everything, my trust, my love, my life. And you repaid me with betrayal. Tears spilled down Marianne's cheeks as the full weight of her loss crushed her. But I am not without compassion, Gareth continued. The $1 million mentioned in the will still stands. It's not the fortune you craved, but it's enough to start again. A chance at redemption, should you choose to take it. The screen faded to black. The room exploded into movement, questions shouted, lawyers whispering in tight circles, security guards now stationed by the doors, likely under Gareth's final instructions. Marianne remained still. Gareth's words echoed in her mind, a chance at redemption. But how does one come back from so much betrayal? As the cold, hard truth of her situation sank in, Marianne finally understood. The game she thought she was playing, manipulating a sick husband, chasing wealth with a younger lover, had all been an illusion. The real game had been orchestrated by Gareth from his hospital bed, and it was a level of strategy she had never imagined. In his final act, Gareth Montero had not only ensured his legacy and punished the guilty, he had redefined the very soul of his empire. The Montero Corporation would now stand as a beacon of ethical business, its wealth used to heal rather than harm. And Marianne, she was left with nothing but the bitter realization that she had sacrificed true love and a life of purpose for an illusion that had crumbled to dust. As authorities arrived and began unraveling Gareth's intricate web of revelations, a stunned silence fell over the room. Throughout Chicago, in boardrooms and newsrooms alike, the tale of Gareth Montero's final masterstroke spread rapidly. It would become the stuff of legend, a story of betrayal, redemption, and poetic justice that would be recounted for years to come. Somewhere in the city, as the sun set on the day that marked Marianne Montero's downfall and the rebirth of her husband's legacy, Holden Davis boarded a plane. A small bag of hastily packed belongings was his only possession. He had lost everything in his pursuit of wealth and power, but for now, he had managed to escape with his freedom. As night descended over Chicago, the lights of the Montero building continued to shine bright, a beacon of power and influence on the city's skyline. But within its walls, a new era was unfolding, one that would reshape not just a single corporation but the very concept of wielding power responsibly in the modern world. Gareth Montero was gone, but his presence lingered. His final act of brilliance ensured that his name would be remembered not only as a successful businessman, but as a visionary who transformed personal tragedy into a force for good. In a small, empty apartment across town, Marianne Montero sat alone, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. The road to redemption stretched out before her, long and uncertain. The Chicago Tribune's headline screamed from newsstands across the city, Montero's last stand, betrayal, revenge, and redemption. In the days following the explosive will reading, Gareth Montero's final masterpiece dominated conversations everywhere, from high-powered boardrooms to corner coffee shops. Marianne Montero, once the toast of Chicago's elite social circles, now found herself at the center of a relentless media firestorm. Paparazzi camped outside her penthouse, desperate for a glimpse of the fallen socialite. Old friends vanished overnight, Calls and invitations dried up as quickly as her influence. The same people who once fawned over her at charity galas and exclusive events now whispered behind her back, reveling in the shock and fear of her downfall. Surrounded by the luxuries of a life that was rapidly slipping away, Marin felt the walls closing in. The monthly payments from Gareth's will wouldn't begin for another 30 days, and her access to the Montero fortune had been cut off entirely. For the first time in decades, she faced the looming threat of financial uncertainty. Her phone buzzed incessantly with calls from reporters seeking comments, lawyers offering their services, and a few so-called friends reaching out more out of morbid curiosity than genuine concern. She ignored them all, lost in a haze of disbelief and rising panic. It was Sabrina, of all people, who finally broke through Marianne's isolation. The assistant arrived at the penthouse unannounced, armed with a stack of papers and a determination that left no room for argument. "Mrs. Montero," Sabrina said, her voice crisp and professional as ever, "we need to discuss your immediate future." Sabrina's tone was firm but not unkind. "The board has requested that you vacate this property within the week. They've arranged a modest apartment in Lincoln Park, paid for through your monthly stipend." Marin stared at her, uncomprehending. "Vacate? But this is my home. Gareth and I bought this penthouse together." Sabrina's expression softened, a flicker of pity crossing her face. "I'm afraid not, Mrs. Montero. The penthouse was always owned by the corporation. You're welcome to take your personal belongings, of course, but everything else must remain." As the harsh reality began to sink in, nausea surged through Marianne. She stumbled to the bathroom, retching into the marble sink. When she emerged, pale and shaken, Sabrina remained there, waiting patiently. "Why are you doing this?" Marin asked, her voice hoarse. "Why help me at all after everything that's happened?" Sabrina met her gaze evenly. "Because it's what Mr. Montero would have wanted. Despite everything, he believed in second chances. This is yours, Mrs. Montero. I suggest you take it." Over the next few days, Marin moved through the motions of packing her life away, feeling like a stranger in her own home. Each designer dress, every piece of extravagant jewelry, seemed to mock her, relics of a life built on greed and deception. As she sorted through her belongings, Marin stumbled upon a photo album she hadn't looked at in years. Inside were pictures from the early days of her relationship with Gareth, candid shots of them laughing together, their eyes shining with love and shared dreams. Tears streamed down her face as she remembered the woman she once was, hopeful, full of genuine affection for the brilliant, driven man who had swept her off her feet. When had it all changed? When had the joy of building a life together been replaced by a hollow pursuit of more money, more status, more thrills? Marin couldn't pinpoint the exact moment, but she knew she had lost herself somewhere along the way. The day of the move arrived, gray and drizzly, perfectly mirroring Marianne's mood. A small moving truck waited outside, ready to transport the few belongings she had decided to keep. Taking one last look around the penthouse, Marianne felt a strange mixture of grief and relief. This place had been her gilded cage, and while leaving terrified her, a small part of her welcomed the chance to begin anew. Her new apartment in Lincoln Park was a far cry from the luxury she had once taken for granted. The rooms were cramped, the furniture basic, and the view was nothing but a brick wall. No more sweeping cityscapes or glittering skylines. As Marin unpacked her meager boxes, she felt the faintest glimmer of something she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of possibility. But that feeling quickly faded as the harshness of her new life set in. The first time Marin went grocery shopping, she found herself overwhelmed by the mundane tasks of budgeting and meal planning. She had never given such things a thought before. Personal chefs and household staff had always handled those trivialities. Her first attempt at cooking dinner was nothing short of a disaster. The kitchen filled with smoke, and the charred mess she pulled from the oven was unrecognizable, nothing like the gourmet meals she had once taken for granted. She sank to the floor of her tiny kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of her failure. Marin broke down in tears. How had her life come to this? But as the days turned into weeks, she slowly began to adapt. She learned to navigate public transportation, to compare prices for the best deals, to find pride in small accomplishments like successfully doing her own laundry. It was a humbling experience, but with each small victory, Marianne felt a growing sense of independence she had never known before. A month after the move, Marianne received her first stipend payment. a sum that once would have seemed like pocket change, but now represented a lifeline. She sat at her modest dining table, carefully budgeting every dollar and realizing for the first time the value of money earned rather than simply acquired. As Marin settled into her new routine, she couldn't help but reflect on the choices that had brought her to this point: betraying Gareth, her affair with Holden, the relentless pursuit of wealth and status. It all felt so hollow now, so meaningless compared to the simple contentment she was gradually discovering in her new life. In those early days, her thoughts often drifted to Holden, wondering where he had disappeared to and if he ever thought of her. But as time passed, Marin realized what she had felt for him was never truly love, only a desperate attempt to recapture the excitement and passion. She believed she had lost everything. One afternoon, about 3 months into her new life, Marianne was walking through Lincoln Park when she spotted a familiar face. Daniel Chun, Gareth's former CFO, was sitting on a bench feeding the pigeons. For a moment, she considered turning away, not ready to confront anyone from her old life. But something made her pause. "Daniel," she said hesitantly, approaching the bench. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Mrs. Montero, I didn't expect to see you here." Marianne smiled ruefully. "Please, call me Marianne. I think we're well past formalities at this point." Daniel nodded, gesturing for her to sit. For a few minutes, they sat in awkward silence, watching the pigeons squabble over breadcrumbs. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I wanted to hate you, you know. When everything came out, when we all realized what you and that Davis fellow were planning, I was furious. We all were. Gareth was more than just a boss to many of us. He was a mentor, a friend." Marianne felt tears sting her eyes. "I know. And I'm sorry, Daniel. More sorry than I can ever express." Daniel turned to look at her, his expression softening. "I can see that. And I think Gareth saw it too. In the end, that's why he gave you this chance." They talked for hours, Daniel filling Marianne in on the changes at the company since Gareth's death. The Montero Corporation was thriving under its new structure, its ethical practices and philanthropic efforts earning praise from all corners. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Daniel rose to leave. "You know, Marianne," he said, "there's a position opening up at the Montero Foundation. It's entry-level, nothing glamorous, but if you're interested, I could put in a word." Marianne stared at him, stunned by the unexpected offer. "Why would you do that for me, after everything?" Daniel shrugged. "Because I believe in second chances, too. And because I think working to help others might be exactly what you need to find your way back." As he walked away, Marianne remained on the bench, her mind spinning. The thought of returning to the Montero world, even in such a humble role, was both exciting and daunting. Could she do it? Did she even deserve the chance? Over the next few weeks, Marianne grappled with the decision. She started volunteering at a local community center, offering her skills to help with their fundraising efforts. To her surprise, she found the work deeply fulfilling. For the first time in years, she felt like she was making a real difference, using her abilities and connections for something beyond her own gain. It was during one of these volunteer sessions that Marianne experienced a moment that would change everything. She was serving meals at a homeless shelter when she noticed a man at the end of the line, his face partially hidden by a scraggly beard and a worn baseball cap. There was something painfully familiar about him, something in the way he moved. As he approached to receive his meal, their eyes met, and Marianne's heart nearly stopped. It was Holden, the man she had once believed she loved, her co-conspirator in their ill-fated scheme, standing before her as a shadow of his former self. His designer clothes were replaced by threadbare jeans and a stained jacket. The charm and confidence that had once drawn her to him were gone, replaced by a haunted, desperate look. They stared at each other for a long moment, the weight of their shared history hanging heavily between them. Then, without a word, Holden accepted his meal and shuffled away, disappearing into the crowd of hungry patrons. That night, Marianne lay awake in her small apartment, her mind churning with thoughts of Holden, Gareth, the life she had lost, and the new one she was trying to build. She realized she had been given something rare, a chance to learn from her mistakes, to grow, to become someone better than she had been before. The next morning, Marianne called Daniel Chun and accepted the position at the Montero Foundation. She knew it would be difficult, facing those she had betrayed, earning back their trust one small act at a time. But for the first time in a long while, Marianne felt a sense of purpose and determination to make the most of the second chance she had been given. As she prepared for her first day at the foundation, Marianne took out the old photo album once more. Gazing at the pictures of her younger self with Gareth, she made a silent vow to honor his memory by becoming the person he had always believed she could be, to use this opportunity to make a real difference in the world. Little did Marianne know, as she set out on this new path, that Gareth Montero had left one final surprise, a last twist in the tale that would test her newfound resolve and force her to confront the true nature of redemption. Across town, in an unremarkable office building, Sabrina sat across from Jake Green, the private investigator who had played a key role in uncovering Marianne and Holden's scheme. Between them, on the desk, lay a thick folder, its contents known only to them and the late Gareth Montero. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked, his gruff voice edged with concern. "It could undo everything we've accomplished." Sabrina nodded, her expression resolute. "It's what Mr. Montero wanted. He believed that true redemption required more than punishment or charity. It demanded a genuine change of heart." As they discussed the final phase of Gareth's plan, pieces of a puzzle years in the making began to fall into place. The game, it seemed, was far from over. Even from beyond the grave, Gareth Montero had one last lesson to impart, not just to Marianne, but to everyone touched by his life and death. In the weeks to come, Chicago would once again be shaken by revelations from the Montero Empire. But this time, the story would be one of hope, genuine transformation, and the power of forgiveness to reshape lives. As the sun set over the Windy City, the stage was set for the final act of Gareth Montero's grand design. And at the center of it all, unknowing but no longer unwilling, stood Marianne, a woman standing on the edge of either her greatest triumph or her ultimate downfall. The choice, as Gareth had always believed, would be hers to make. 6 months had passed since Marianne had taken her position at the Montero Foundation. The crisp Chicago autumn had given way to a harsh winter, and now the first signs of spring were beginning to emerge in the city's parks and gardens. Marianne stood at the window of her small office, gazing out at the bustling street below. Her life now was a far cry from the opulence she had once known. Yet, as she reflected on the past 6 months, Marianne realized she had found a contentment that had eluded her for decades. Her days were now filled with purpose. She poured herself into her work at the foundation, leveraging her social connections and event planning skills to organize fundraisers and awareness campaigns. The irony was not lost on her. Those same talents she once used to climb the social ladder were now being directed to help those less fortunate. The transition had not been easy. Many of her former acquaintances still regarded her with suspicion or outright disdain. There were days when the weight of her past threatened to crush her, when the memory of Gareth's betrayal and her own mistakes loomed large. But slowly, steadily, Marianne was rebuilding her life and reputation. She had even formed an unlikely friendship with Sabrina. The assistant's unwavering loyalty to Gareth had once been a source of tension, but over time, they developed a mutual respect that grew into genuine affection. Turning away from the window, Marianne settled back at her desk. Her gaze drifted to a framed photo, a group shot from the Foundation's most recent charity gala, her first major event since joining the organization. In the photo, she stood surrounded by colleagues, her smile genuine, her eyes bright with accomplishment. Beside it sat an older photograph of her and Gareth on their wedding day. She kept it there, not as a reminder of what she had lost, but of the person she was striving to be. A knock at the door broke her reverie. Sabrina entered, her expression grave. "Marianne," she said, her tone heavy, "there's something you need to see." Sabrina placed a thick manila envelope on the desk. Marianne recognized it immediately. The envelope was identical to the ones distributed at the reading of Gareth's will all those months ago. With trembling hands, Marianne opened it. Inside was a letter, penned in Gareth's unmistakable handwriting, and a USB drive. "My dearest Marianne," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then you've taken the first steps toward redemption. I always believed the woman I fell in love with was still there, hidden beneath years of resentment and misguided ambition." Tears blurred Marianne's vision as she continued reading. Gareth explained that everything, from the fake will reading to the calculated downfall of her and Holden, had been part of a meticulously crafted plan. Not one designed merely for revenge, but for redemption. Simply punishing you would have accomplished nothing, Gareth wrote. You needed to remember who you were, to rediscover the passion for helping others that first drew me to you. And so I created this test, the foundation, the job offer, even your encounters with old acquaintances. It was all intended to offer you a genuine chance at a new life. Marianne's mind swirled with disbelief. She glanced up at Sabrina, who nodded solemnly. Keep reading, Sabrina urged gently. The letter continued, explaining that the USB drive held evidence clearing Marianne of any legal wrongdoing. Gareth had used his considerable resources and influence to ensure she would not face criminal charges regardless of the path she chose. But the real decision is yours, Marianne, the letter concluded. On this drive, you'll also find documents transferring a significant portion of my personal fortune to you, enough to reclaim the life you once knew if that's what you desire. Or, you can continue on this new path, using those resources to expand the Foundation's work and make a meaningful difference in the world. The choice, my dear, is entirely yours. That choice will be your final test, and my last gift to you. Marianne realized she was weeping openly by the time she finished reading. Sabrina placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. He never stopped loving you, she said softly. Even in the end, he believed in your capacity to change. Marianne sat in silence, the weight of Gareth's final revelations pressing down on her. After a moment, she rose and walked to the window, gazing out at the city sprawled before her, a tapestry of lights and lives intertwined. She thought of the work she had been doing, the people she had helped, and the purpose she had found. She also remembered her old life, the lavish parties, the mindless shopping, the endless pursuit of more. Marianne made her choice. Turning back to Sabrina, a small smile formed on her lips. I think the Foundation could do a lot of good with those resources. Don't you? Tears shimmered in Sabrina's eyes as she nodded. I think Gareth would be proud. As the two women embraced, the final piece of Gareth Montero's grand design fell into place. He had given Marianne the ultimate test, the freedom to choose who she truly wanted to be. In the end, betrayal had not led to destruction but to transformation. Marianne had lost a life of luxury and status, but she had gained something far more valuable, the chance to redeem herself and become the person Gareth had always believed she could be. As the sun set over Chicago, casting long shadows across the city, Gareth Montero's true legacy took shape. It was not defined by towering skyscrapers or immense wealth, but by the changed heart of the woman he had loved. Marianne Montero stepped out of her office and into the fading light, ready to embrace a new life. A life of purpose, redemption, and the kind of wealth that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. The game was over. And in the end, love, not betrayal, had won. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. V.